Okay, let's dive in. Jets, Giants. And I want to put in perspective my relationship with weather games. For the first 18 years of my life, born and raised Davis, California, right by Sacramento. Then for 5 years, I went to Cal Poly, which is in the middle of California by the water. And then for a couple years, I lived in Fresno. So until I was like 24, 25 years old and moved to Philadelphia, I did an internship with the Kansas City Chiefs my senior year in college, but was there for like 3 months. Now, by the end of that, it was freezing cold and, the field would freeze and you were freezing your ass off. But truly living a winter in a non-California place in the Northeast wasn't until 2010. And I'll never forget when I worked in the office, you just wore normal clothes or whatever. But on game day, you wore a suit to the game. So all the home games, I didn't travel. I just went to the home games. And you wore a suit. And I owned one suit. It was a suit that my father had bought me, I think, for like my graduation present in college. It was a nice, like, Italian suit, which was probably too baggy at the time. But hell, I still own it. And I remember going to a game early on in the season. It's hot, humid, you're sweating. And then the weather turns. And, for most of us on the West Coast, depending on where you live, winter, like, we don't live in the snow. I grew up 2 hours away from Lake Tahoe. When I wanted to go to the snow or the freezing cold, we got in our car and we drove 2 hours to Tahoe. And then when we were over it, we came home. But when I lived in Philadelphia, you just kind of live in it. And obviously when you work in football, you play in it. And it's a huge part of football. From Pittsburgh to Philly to DC to obviously New York teams to Boston. And then, the Midwest teams from Chicago and Kansas City, like, playing in the cold. This isn't just, it comes in December, right? You see these games in the middle to late October. There's still 2.5 months left of the regular season. And then if you want to play in the playoffs, you have to be able to play in inclement weather. But I'll never forget showing up to the game and it being probably 30 degrees. It, might have been a Sunday or Monday night game. And by 10 minutes of standing on the field pregame, I couldn't feel my body. And everyone in the Northeast, you guys wear those long trench coats that are thick that keep you warm. I not only did I not own one, it never even crossed my mind to purchase one. And then by the next couple of days, I had to call my parents. I'm like, I didn't realize you got to wear something over your suit or you freeze your ass off. And when I was scouting the West Coast, I remember in a draft meeting, Matt Barkley came up. And I'm like, I don't see it. I don't think he has the physical characteristics to play in Philadelphia. And that would go for any of the other teams that are in inclement spots. I'm like, LA guy, played at SC, born and raised. Like, I don't feel that vibe. Average arm, like, not a great athlete. Like, I'm not into it. I don't see it. Now, obviously, Chip disagreed. He drafted him, and I was gone a couple of days later. But I've always believed that, and Tom Brady is a good example of, yeah, he's a California guy. And then he went and spent 5 years in Michigan, right? So by the time he got to Boston, he was somewhat acclimated to the weather, right? Kaepernick, same thing, from Stockton or whatever, Turlock, California, but then spent 5 years in Nevada, Reno, where it's really, really cold. I can attest, when I was at Fresno State, we played a game up there, I think in early November when Cap was on the team, and he destroyed us. And by about the second quarter, I'm like, I can't feel my body. And I got several layers on. So playing in the cold at court, like other positions, offensive lineman, defensive lineman, like that usually translates. But at quarterback, it always makes me nervous. And when you draft the number 2, you better feel very, very comfortable if you're one of those teams, this guy can play in tough weather, right? And Zach Wilson, in theory, Provo, Utah, it gets cold in BYU, you would think. But you watch this guy in inclement weather, and I said, listen, I got to take this back. I said a couple weeks ago on Sunday show that we do with Colin, like he was becoming a functional player. Willie Colon went on this fantastic rant. I love it when former players just can talk like us normal media people or normal people that talk about football, just can talk and verbalize their thoughts like a fan. And just like, this is embarrassing. So many players are afraid to say stuff. That's why I never had a problem like Rodney Harrison, some of these guys that piss people off. Yes. Why do you think most people that piss people off that are sitting in my seat that have podcasts or host shows, like, you got to be willing to like say some uncomfortable things. And Willie Colon was just shitting on Zach Wilson, and kind of rightfully so. He's not a functional player right now. It is crazy that they can barely win these games when their team is really good. I understand why the Giants can't win. They're not that good. They're on their third string quarterback. This guy was drafted number 2 overall. And I'm watching that game a lot like the Steeler Jags game, inclement weather, not an easy place to play, right? But when looking back, Joe Douglas, when you took him, you had to be very, very comfortable that this shit was going to translate, right? And he doesn't play well in the sun, let alone bad weather. This guy can't complete 60% of his passes right now in the modern day NFL. I mean, he is a terrible player. He really is. They won despite him. The third downs in that game were just an embarrassment in totality for both teams. It was closer to 0 third downs converted than 10, and there were 34 opportunities. But the Jets have a major, major problem on their hands because a lot like the Browns, they have a playoff team. Just remove the quarterback and just look at the totality of the roster. You go, that's a 10 to 12 win team, depending on the quarterback. If you can just let's just take the guy who represents just pure average over the last 4 or 5 years. To me, that'd be a Jimmy Garoppolo. He's not good, but he's not bad. He's just somewhere between 14 and 18 in the NFL. He can have series where he's like a top 10 quarterback, and he can have series where he's a bottom 5 quarterback. But if your team's good around him, you can compete to make the playoffs every year. And that, to me, is like what the Jets and the Browns would die for. Now, in fairness to the Browns, their starting quarterback has this injury situation that no one can get their, kind of head around. Everyone's saying he's actually hurt. It's just bizarre. But the reality is they're rolling out PJ Walker, and it was crazy that they had won the previous 2 weeks with that guy basically as their starting quarterback. The Jets, once he tears his Achilles, and I said it from the jump, you go into a season with this guy as your backup quarterback. This is not other positions where you can be like, we don't love our backup guard, but like you can play with it. Like most teams have question marks at other position. Your backup quarterback, when you are a playoff level team, is one snap away from starting every single game. And we saw that with the Jets in week 1. It was 4 or 5 plays into the season. He's your starter then from then on out. And hell, in the middle of the season, he's one snap away from starting a couple weeks. It's the only position where the moment an injury happens, that guy's getting unlimited snap. There's no rotation. There's nothing else you can do. It's like a kicker and a punter. If he's your starting quarterback, if he's your starting kicker, if he's your starting punter, that's the case. And the moment Rodgers went down, just like the moment Kenny Pickett went down, I'm looking up and seeing, I Googled it this morning. I was like, didn't they sign him to an extension? They signed this offseason, Mitch Trubisky, to an extension. If he's going to be your backup quarterback and you hold yourself to a playoff standard, you have to realize at any moment, a broken rib, a broken leg, a torn ACL, a broken hand, like Kenny Pickett can miss time. And Kenny Pickett is more than debatable, right, how good he is or not, right? I think we all know when he's good, they can compete, but he has a lot of bad games too. And also, like Zach Wilson, in inclement weather, don't love it, which is not ideal. Though the Steelers would say, well, we got to watch him. He played at Pitt for 5 years in our backyard, literally in our stadium. The moment you can't play well in inclement weather and you're starting on one of these teams, you're just fucked. You really are. The Steelers forever had Roethlisberger. The Giants forever had Eli Manning. Obviously, the Patriots. These guys could play in those weather conditions. One of the best weather games I think I've ever seen. And listen, the box score will not reflect it. But if you were watching it live, the Giants versus the 49ers, Harbaugh's first year NFC Championship game, driving rainstorm at Candlestick. They are peppering Eli Manning. Play in, play out. He just kept getting up. He was able to throw the ball, unlike Alex Smith, who couldn't complete third down passes. And if you can't play in weather conditions, listen, I don't know how the Jets are going to get to the finish line. Clearly, they're somehow 4-3, and that is a huge, huge. The rest of the team should get a standing ovation on a daily basis the moment they walk into the team meeting from Zach Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett, because with this offensive output, it's just not sustainable to win. You need such weird shit to happen on a weekly basis. You need your defense to play so awesome. You need your special teams to block a field goal, or hell, them to miss field goals. And this quarterback situation is just a reflection of everyone misses on picks. Every single team does. Whether you're drafting at 2 or whether you're drafting at 150, you're not going to hit on every draft pick. But when you hold on to a draft pick, when you know you've missed, it's when you find yourself in trouble. And right now, the Jets are holding on for dear life because they had moved on after last season. But then once they got Aaron Rodgers, they kind of pivoted. They thought he could be, I don't know. I wouldn't even say resurrected, but could learn from him. Well, the moment Rodgers tears his Achilles and is in Los Angeles rehabbing, I know he comes back every once in a while. He's been to a couple games. That's not the same. You are dependent when the ball snapped on that guy making plays. And that what we just witnessed, because I don't even count the Giants offense, right? Saquon Barkley's basically getting the ball every single play. What the Jets were doing on offense. I mean, there were some plays, and I've seen this now a couple weeks in a row, where it'll be Garrett Wilson or someone on the outside, and they'll be running like a go route. And Zach Wilson, for whatever reason, will think it was like some hot route, or maybe he thought he had given an alert, and he'll throw like this back shoulder fade, or he'll throw like a quick out, and the guy will just be running 30 yards up the field, and the ball will skip into the sideline. So it's one thing if your physical attributes as your accuracy are more than questionable. It doesn't feel like he always knows the offense, which is pretty scary. And I don't know. There's no fix. Just like with the Browns, there's no fix. So you just got to hold on. Hopefully your team makes plays. Somehow, if you just make the playoffs with this level quarterback play, it should be worth in your fans' mind a playoff victory alone, because that is an incredible accomplishment.